Welcome to the Circle Sessions featuring the Circle of Experts. As you know, the Circle of Experts are me, Brett Johnson from Circle 270 Media Podcast Consultants, and also Yasmin Robles from Robles Designs, Tanisha English Amamu of TJE Communications, and Don the Idea Guy. Each week, we all get together in some form and talk about how to make podcasts better for you, make them more effective, and some ideas, whether it's on social media or the website or just general ideas. We get it here to you with our podcast on a weekly basis to help you create podcasts better. So let's take a look at defining your ideal podcast listener in the coming year, in 2025. Who's your podcast for? Let's start defining your ideal podcast listener. Some key points to consider. Creating a podcast involves defining your ideal listener to target your content effectively. Think about it. You put a lot of time in creating content, but who's that content for? This process enables more engaging, intentional content, helping to build a loyal audience, and it's going to improve your podcast's success. What is an ideal podcast listener? That's up to you. Your ideal podcast listener. It's a specific audience defined by demographics, behavior, and needs. Let's put it like a consumer avatar in marketing. Demographics include age, job title, education, socioeconomic status, hobbies, and problems. So you're defining this avatar to help you relate to how you're creating this content. I can go back into an example being in radio. When I was in radio, a lot of radio stations at one point or time to remind their on-air personalities who they're talking to keep the content that they're bringing on air, how they're talking. They would have stand-ups, cut out stand-ups of the model listener in studio with them to remember. Let's say it was a soft AC station. Remember what you're talking about is the mom and dad and maybe 3 kids with them. And to remember what you say, those 3 pairs of ears, the younger kids could be hearing what you're saying as well, too, as well as remembering it's a mom and dad. So the content needs to relate to them. Think of it that way. When you're creating content in your podcast, you have an ideal listener. Who is that? And keep that in mind. But you also need to define your ideal listener. How to do it? Evaluate the competitive landscape. Research competing podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Take a listen. Take a look at who they're and how they're putting their podcast together, how they're describing their podcast, what's in the show notes. Listen to their episodes. See how they're doing things, not to replicate, but to make sure that you're not replicating what they're doing. You can also use tools like Podchaser and Refonic to identify your competition. That gives you a little bit more granular information to understand listener preferences and all in to fill in the gap in the market. Identify that niche. Bottom line is you do need to narrow your podcast topic to focus on a specialized audience. Avoid being too general to stand out. That, if nothing else from this podcast, that is the one thing. It's hard to refine. Continue to refine, but also remember you need to have a very specific audience. Steps to get there: brainstorm podcast ideas, whether it's coming from internally, you're hearing, you're listening, pain points, topics that that very specific audience will want to pass along. Identify those pain points in your industry and elaborate on them to solve them, or to at least offer the opportunity that you are the answer to that pain point. Choose the most meaningful and unique ideas and add a unique angle to differentiate your podcast. That's going to make you who you are. Start clarifying your goals. Answer the why are you podcasting before you open up that mic, before you start recording. Why are you creating that specific episode? And in general, why are you podcasting? Why are you continuing to do this week after week, or every other week or monthly, whatever your process is? Why are you podcasting? Common goals include brand awareness, thought leadership, industry, networking, educating an audience, or entertaining listeners. And guess what? It can be a combination of a couple of those. You could be educating an audience, but also entertaining listeners as well, too, because that is the way you present things. It's okay. Create a listener persona. So again, what we mentioned, build a detailed profile of your ideal listener, and that's going to include a uh, demographics of like age, education, income, job title, and industry. Especially the job title and industry. If you're a business podcast, you need to know who you're specifically talking to and how to talk to them. Also include some hobbies, challenges, and goals relevant to your content. That's going to develop you to be relatable to them, to understand that I know where you are. I come from where you are. I understand you, and you can talk to them one-on-one in that podcast. Focus on specific needs. So identify challenges your target audience faces and build episodes to solve those problems. That's why they're listening. That if that's the podcast you've built, create that. Forums and audience surveys help for identifying audience pain points as well. So, in other words, you're listening to your listeners. They give you content ideas by creating surveys or looking into forums that, whether you created or not, what are people talking about in that space, that in those people that you're trying to attract to your podcast? Find those pain points and come up with solutions for your podcast. Writing a listener profile, combine all that gathered data into a listener persona or story to understand your audience deeply. For example, as I mentioned, that radio station putting together a cutout of a family. So maybe your persona is a guy named Bob. He's 45. He's head of marketing and finance. His challenges are keeping up with industry trends from what you've seen, and what he needs. He needs digestible, actionable, trend focused insights. And again, you're getting that information from your little bit of a research in forums. That's the starting point. Go right there, and then it starts to evolve. Key metrics to consider, listening habits. So here's where the most common question we get at Circle 270 Media is, how long should my podcast be? Shouldn't be any longer than 1 minute longer than it needs to be. Again, think about how podcasts are used. I would suggest, again, anytime you want to, as long as you want it to be, but don't make it. Yeah, let's say somebody suggests, well, it should be 30 minutes. Well, don't make it 30 minutes just to make it 30 minutes. If you have 15 minutes worth of content and it's gold, you go with 15 minutes. If it's a 30-minute podcast and every bit of that is gold, then it's 30 minutes. But whatever virtual contract you made with your listener, stick to it. And say that it's going to be a 15-minute podcast. So if you're going to be 15 minutes, start melting down, cut away the fat of that content and make it 15 minutes. Or if you want it to be a half an hour, then it's a half an hour. There's really no magical moment of podcasting, but you can also keep in mind how podcasts are listened to as well, of course. Demographics and time availability. That's where that comes in. Occupation and lifestyle can dictate podcast length and content style. So you can, again, that little bit of research you do, how people are ingesting content and when are they active on LinkedIn or Facebook with questions. Um, Sometimes it's just asking listeners. When you start to build up that base of listeners, who cares if it's 10, 15, or 500? If they're engaged, they're going to tell you when they listen, how long they listen, and how they want you to put that content together. Big thing is allow yourself to adapt and evolve. If nothing else from what we just talked about, it's pretty important to, allow your podcast target audience to shift, and it's probably going to shift as you grow. Collect feedback to refine your content and keep meeting those listener expectations. Quick takeaways, start with that competitor analysis, clarify goals, be specific, and understand listener behavior. By knowing your ideal listener, you're going to enhance your chances of producing engaging and a successful podcast. So let's get into how to grow your podcast audience. You've crafted an exceptional content, it's an exceptional podcast to impress your target audience. You've got it laid out. You've got the next year's worth of content, 6 months worth of content. You're ready to go. The next step is to learn how to grow your podcast listenership. Here's a plan to optimize growth and visibility. Some things to think about. Key strategies to grow your podcast audience include Knowing your audience, define your ideal listener. Focus on creating content that provides value to your specific audience instead of trying to appeal to everyone. Another way of thinking of this is when you create something, is it shareable? Is it something that the listener is going to listen to and go, I have to listen to this again? Or I have got to share this with so and so. You don't know until it happens, but that is a goal of what you can create to make sure that you go, okay, what I'm creating here, is it an aha moment? Is it something that's shareable? Strive for that with every piece of content that you create. May not happen every time, but if that's the goal with the episodes you create, that's where it's going to go. Your batting average, hey, baseball players make millions of dollars just by batting 250, 300. That means 1 out of 4 times that they're at the plate, they actually get a hit. So if you're getting 1 out of 4 episodes that are shared, you're doing pretty good. So the bar is not necessarily really high, but at the same time, keeping that goal with every episode that you create is something admirable. It keeps you driven. Make your podcast discoverable. I can't tell you how many times that we work with new clients that they've only have their podcast available on one platform. Amazing as it is, they do. And you're missing out. Even those that now have it on 2, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. What about the others? There are 15, 20, 25 other platforms out there. Yes, they may only have 1 listener here, 2 listeners here that would be specific to your podcast, but it all adds up. Why not be there? It's free. Get the opportunity, expose your podcast everywhere that you can. And of course, don't neglect YouTube. It's the second largest search engine and preferred by many podcast consumers. YouTube is a whole different beast, and it's something to be addressed. We're going to take a look at that more in this next year, working with our clients as well too. That everybody has to be on YouTube. Yes and no. That is definitely a platform that's a grind. That's video, much more editing, different uses, different use case uses in regards to why using YouTube, but it's something to be addressed. It's not going away. And there are many, many different ways of looking at how to use YouTube. And we'll, again, like I said, we'll be addressing that in 2025, this coming year, on how to best utilize time in front of camera and use resources, whether it's from, recording every episode and dropping every episode, or maybe it's just very specific needs and why you drop specific video podcasts on YouTube. It's the gamut. It truly is. But it's that, again, going back to your ideal listener. Where are they? Would they be interested in having a video from you? Is it an effective way to reach your audience? Utilizing podcast SEO, optimizing your show and episode descriptions with relevant keywords. We've talked about search engine optimization many, many times with Yasmin Robles, one of the Circle of Experts. You can go back to other episodes that we've talked about that. It's key. You can't not address search engine optimization when it comes to creating your podcast. It's not tremendously difficult. It's just something to keep in mind on how you post your podcast and what wording you're using. Uh, y- Gone are the days of putting just a generic a generic title and just maybe a few words, a few sentences in the show notes. It's done. You can't do that anymore. You need to be very specific and very purposeful in regards to what you create around your content. You can also use, and you should, a broad niche of keywords. For example, search engines are going to see this differently. If you use true crime or you use true crime in Cuba, SEO knows exactly what you're talking about, even more refined when it's true crime in Cuba. And just that example in itself should be eye opening. Repurpose episodes into SEO-friendly long-form blog posts or articles for better organic traffic. If you aren't using a transcription service right now, you are light years behind. There are some costs to it, but it's worth the investment. It truly, truly is worth the investment because it not only gives you SEO opportunities, it gives you an opportunity to create long form blog posts off of what you just created without you having to rethink and readdress and re-listen to a podcast episode that you've created. It's it's something you have to have. You have to have that transcript created from your podcast. Also, creating a mobile friendly website for your podcast with easy subscription and listing options. That is key in many, many forms. And one being uh, podcast platforms can go away. They change their algorithms. If you send them to Spotify, you send your listeners to Apple Podcasts, you send them to YouTube, whatever the case might be, they can also get lost in the jungle of other podcasts and other YouTube videos. You need to send them to your home, your.com. Take advantage of social media, tailoring your content to different platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, Reddit. There's plenty of research out there, and we talked to Tanisha English Amamu about social media platforms, and every episode we go into the pros and the cons of each one of them and the nuances and the new things that are happening. Each platform has its own listener base. And again, going back to understanding your listeners, that's going to help you choose which social media platform or forums that you are going to engage in, that you're going to post in. Posting on everything is not the answer. Find your audience. Where are they? It may take some experimentation. It might, but at the same time, your gut's going to tell you you need to be here and create that content for those platforms, because every platform is different. Using audiograms, animated audio snippets with transcripts to grab attention on social media is pretty important. If you're not, this is that middle ground between going full bore into video, or just that you need to be having some video snippets, but you're still camera shy. You don't have the right camera yet. You just want to be on camera with what you're doing. Fine. But addressing it and utilizing audiograms is kind of a way to do that. What I would address is this, or utilize this concept by doing audiograms, is rather than a full episode, don't do full episodes. Pull some great quotes. Again, going back to your transcript, put that on the audiogram, and also create some great imagery that's going to be tied to that quote. The goal is to stop the thumb from scrolling. That's what it has to be. So, creating some great imagery, doing some great pull quotes from your podcast will do better than doing the full episode as an audiogram. Embed podcast links smartly, intelligently, using services maybe like Linktree, and engage with your listeners. Set up communities on platforms like Facebook group, LinkedIn, or Slack to allow some open dialogue. It's going to serve many purposes. Now, again, it's a big gulp. It truly is, creating Facebook groups or a LinkedIn group, that sort of thing. But it offers the opportunity for you to engage, offers the opportunity to hear pain points, which means future content, future episode content. So it's multi-purpose, but you've got to be there. You need to engage, because that gives the listener an opportunity to get in front of you, get some of your attention outside of the podcast. And we've got a couple of clients considering that, but we've also couched it with, once you create it, you need to live in that community, or allowing that community to have access to you during specific times, control where, when, and where you are. So it's valuable. It truly is valuable, but it's that address how much time it's going to take. Maybe another option I like is enable call-ins and questions using services like SpeakPipe to encourage listener interaction and participation. It's that old radio kind of feel to it. You're calling in for a request for a piece of music. This is just an opportunity for your listeners to give you feedback on the podcast, or the content specifically. That's gold. If you can get feedback on specific content, specific episodes, versus just, I love your podcast, keep up the great work. That's great. Hey, great. But feedback on specific episodes and content, that you want to pay a listener for, but you can allow that opportunity to happen through software that's out there. Leverage paid ad campaigns. I'm not a big proponent on buying social media ads, but they do have their place. They do have their place. I think when you have those specific episodes that you just want to grow, it was that great interview with that person that you've been trying to get on your podcast forever, and you finally got them, and it came out to be a great episode. Yeah, that's legitimate. Lots legitimate to promote. And you can also, invest in podcast platform ads on Spotify or Overcast as two examples. I would be cautious of how much money you spend and on what episodes. If it's just a generic about your podcast itself, I think you're throwing money away. But on a specific episode and wrap some organic around it as well too, yeah, you could get some traction. But make sure that you're watching your KPIs, the key performance indicators, your return on investment. Are you growing with that investment on social media? And then again, tracking and measuring results. Make sure that you're, looking at analytics from Apple Podcast Connect, Spotify, or your hosting platform to understand listener behavior. Downloads really aren't what you should be looking for. They're a number for sure. They're a number, but think about how many podcasts you subscribe to. How many downloads are you getting on your phone that you may never listen to that episode's been downloaded? You see the title, read the show notes, like, nah, I'm not interested. Boom, swipe. It's that's a download, but you didn't listen. That's happening to your episodes as well, too. So another way, to look at that is to, get into the specific platforms and take a look at playthroughs. How long did they play through your podcast episode? Or if your hosting platform has an embed that you can get listeners to listen to that player, you can also get some gauge in regards to how long and how many are listening to those episodes. Download numbers, again, are download numbers, but there are some real numbers you need to be taking a look at available on specific platforms. And also combine podcast analytics with Google Analytics from your podcast websites for deeper insights as well too. If you've got a podcast website, we've talked about that in previous episodes with Yasmin Robles from Robles Designs about how to set that up. It's very easy to do, but it's another metric to take a look at on how your podcast is growing, how your podcast listeners are engaging with your website, as well as, again, that player that's on your website. Some additional tips, consider transcription for accessibility and potential SEO benefits. If you're not using the power of transcripts, you need to consider it today. It's if you're looking and have a budget to invest in your podcast for this next year, the next 3 months, next 6 months, next year, I would look at a transcription service. It's a game changer for your podcast. I can guarantee it. It's been a game changer for our clients. Make your podcast website mobile friendly and include features like the embed players, testimonials, and detailed episode pages. Really create a big picture about what your podcast and those episodes are about. Focus on personalization for different platforms. Avoid the subscribe or follow on Apple Podcasts, on intros for YouTube. Give them a bit more of a call. Everybody knows they can get a podcast on Apple Podcasts. Be more specific about those call to actions. Success requires consistent effort to grow by making your content tailored, engaging, discoverable, and measurable. If needed, hiring podcast marketing experts can also help, like Circle 270 Media Podcast Consultants. Go to mypodcastguy.com. That's mypodcastguy.com. Jump on my calendar. Let's talk about your podcast growth pains and how we can help you turn it around. Now let's talk about the importance of unique listeners and audience engagement. Do a Mythbusters type of episode here. Myth number one: downloads are the gold standard. Uh-uh. Downloads are important. It's a number. It's a number. It's a growth factor. But it's a vanity number. It's truly a vanity number. Downloads do not mean listeners. They don't mean unique listeners. They don't tell you anything about completion rates. Those are the metrics you need to take a look at. Completion rates being how long did they listen to your podcast. A broader view incorporating demographics and device usage is crucial for understanding audience engagement. Get to know your audience. And the great way to do that is creating a newsletter, because that gives you some demographic and gives you buy-in from the listeners. They want content from you, specifically giving you an email address to get a newsletter from you, as well as just general polls on social media. Lots of different ways to engage in that audience, to know a little bit more about them. That's pretty simple for them to do. Click here, boom, done. You've got the information. Myth number two: reliance on hosting platforms. Yes, hosting platforms are key. but they don't provide a complete picture of audience analytics. They can only provide you what the players are providing them. That's it. That's all. Integrating data from multiple sources like Podchaser or Refonic, and adding listener surveys. As I mentioned, they offer better insights because you can customize this, especially those listener surveys. You can customize what you want to know about your listeners. Myth number 3, uniform KPIs for all podcasts. Now, KPIs, key performance indicators, vary in significance across different podcasts. Understanding the broader trends in recent episode performance impacts your key performance interpretation. So, again, it's that looking at the whole, how each podcast works or is not working for listeners. Is a certain topic really just not resonating? You're seeing that episode just not being played in the library once it's been published. That's a gauge as well, too. Let's take a look at episodes that you did 3, 4, 5, 6 months ago. Are they being replayed? Are listeners going back? Are you promoting them as well? Lots of different things to come into play with those KPIs, the key performance indicators. Myth number 4, social media followers equal listeners. No, equating social media followers with podcast listeners can be misleading. Again, it's a number. That's great that you've got X number of followers on social media, but that's maybe all they want from you is to be following you on social media because you're feeding them enough. That's all they want from you is that. And that's great. You've got them. That helps you get bigger and bigger and bigger in that realm, but it doesn't mean it turns into listeners. Building a dedicated podcast newsletter can be more effective than relying on following counts. Truly is. It's as I mentioned, they're allowing you to send them something, and they gave you their email address to give them more information, more background, more detail around what you've just created with a specific episode or your podcast overall. Community engagement in podcasting. Yeah, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, foster community and support among your listeners. You get to hear their pain points. You get content opportunity, maybe even guest opportunity, people that have jumped in the group. It's valuable information that's worthwhile. It's just looking at your time spent with that group. Do you have the time to interact and make it work for you? It's a fantastic way to get a gauge on what your listeners want in new content from you. What's being discussed? That's the most important part about a group. Want to know more? Keep listening to the Circle Sessions and also get a hold of me, mypodcastguy.com. And let's set up a time to talk about your podcast.